Hello and welcome back. This is the BB Effect, my very first podcast. This episode is about how life mirrors you. It's about how life reflects your thoughts, your patterns, and your emotions back to you. So, let me ask you something. Why do certain emotional patterns keep repeating in your life? First, what is a pattern? The word pattern, originally from Latin patronus, meaning protector or a model to follow. In simple terms, a pattern means something that repeats in a recognizable form. In science and psychology, a pattern is basically learned information that repeats and becomes automatic over time. So it is some sort of a belief that you learned and it becomes automatic. Your brain builds patterns to save energy instead of rethinking every situation. It reuses what it has learned before. A pattern is repeated, learned information that the brain turns into automatic response. For example, babies learn language through repetition. They don't study grammar, they just hear, observe, and sounds again and again. They just hear the sounds again and again until speaking becomes automatic, right? The same thing happens with your behavior and reactions. If something repeated enough, the brain turns it into an automatic response without conscious thinking. This is what a pattern is. So I was asking, why do some certain emotional pattern keep repeating in your life? Let's continue. Even when the people, the places, and the situations are completely different, why does the surface change but the feeling stays the same? And at some point you have to wonder, is life actually repeating itself? Or is the same internal patterns simply taking different forms? Because think about it, it is never the exact same story. It's different faces, different names, different environments, but the emotional structure is identical. The same distance, the same disappointment, the same tension, the same abandonment feeling, the same emotional outcome. So the real question is not why does it happening again? The real question is, why does the same pattern recognize itself in a different situation? Now, let's go deeper, because your mind, it doesn't experience life randomly, okay? It organizes experience into emotional patterns. And once a pattern is formed, your perception starts matching reality to it. Not consciously, it's automatically. So, what feels like new experiences are often just a variation of an old emotional pattern, the same pattern. And this is where most people get stuck. They try to change the outside, different people, different choices, different environments, but they never question the internal pattern, that internal structure that keeps reproducing the experience itself. So again, is life repeating itself. And sometimes you're not even realizing, you're not even aware of that. This is I think the saddest part it is. Well, where do they even come from? Because no one is born with emotional patterns. You are not born with fear of rejection. You're not born with any fear. You're not born with abandonment anxiety. You're not born with what kind of a fear within you. So these things are learned, and most of them are learned very early. Let's go back for a moment, not to your thoughts, to your earliest emotional memory system. When you were a baby or when you were a young child, your brain was not thinking in a language yet. It was not analyzing life. It was only doing one thing: absorbing experience as emotional truth. A child does not say, "This situation is complicated." A child says, "This is how life feels." That's it. No logic, no separation, just pure emotional encoding. So, if love felt inconsistent, if attention came and went, if emotional safety was unpredictable, the brain did interpret it as a temporary situation. It stored it as a model of reality. Something like connection is unstable, love is unpredictable, closeness can disappear anytime. I need to adapt to be safe, not as thoughts, as internal wiring. And this is important. These early experiences do not stay in memory as stories. They become patterns of expectation. And expectation becomes perception. And perception becomes behavior. And behavior shapes the kind of experiences you attract and or tolerate. So now you're no longer reacting to the present moment alone. You are reacting to past emotional conditioning projected into the present situation. Now you see, that is why the same emotional feeling returns, because the mind is not trying to create new experiences. It is trying to resolve old ones, unconsciously, of course, over and over again. Now, let's make this very clear. This does not mean your past is controlling you in a fixed way. It also kind of does, but okay. It means your nervous system learned a map, and now it keeps using that map to navigate life, even when the terrain has changed. So when something feels familiar, even if it's hurting you, the system leans toward it, because familiarity is interpreted as known. And the brain prefers always known emotional reality over unknown emotional freedom. This is so important. The brain prefers known emotional reality over unknown emotional freedom. I wanted to repeat that part. So even if the known one is just, painful, so this part is really important. If patterns are learned, which is it, if they are built, they can be rebuilt. Yeah, here is the good news. But not by force, not by changing people, not by controlling outcomes, but by becoming aware of the pattern as it is happening, because you cannot break what you cannot see, what you are not aware of, what you can't understand. You can't. So you need to understand it very well. Most people are not inside reality, they are inside interpretation. So the real shift begins here, not in changing the outside. This is the biggest mistake that people, while they're trying to change the patterns, this is the big mistake. Not in changing the outside, because you can never change the outside but inside, but in noticing the moment the old pattern activates, the moment you assume, the moment you react automatically, the moment emotion arrives before the thought. That is the entry point of change. And once you see it clearly, you are no longer inside a pattern. You are observing it. Yes, observation. Observation changes everything. Observing yourself, it changes everything. It breaks the pattern. So, can the nervous system be rewritten? And the answer is yes, but not in the way most people think, because change is not a mental decision. It is not, I will think differently from now on. The nervous system doesn't respond to intention alone. It responds to repetition of experience. Let's slow this down. Your nervous system is not just your thoughts. It is your body's memory of safety and danger. It learns through repetition what feels safe, what feels unsafe, what feels familiar, and what feels danger. So it stores this not as ideas, but as automatic reactions. So when a new situation appears, you don't decide how to react. Your system reacts first, and your mind explains it later. This is why change feels difficult at the beginning. Because you are not fighting thoughts, you're not fighting with them. You're trying to interrupt an automatic system. But here is where transformation actually begins. Not in forcing new behavior, but in creating a new internal response pattern in the exact moment the old one appears. Let's make this practical. Imagine an old pattern like this. Someone doesn't reply quickly. For example, old system activates. Something is wrong. Anxiety rises. Imagination fills the gap. Emotional reaction begins. This is happening instantly, before thought, before logic. This is the system. Now, rewriting the nervous system means this: not stopping the feeling, but noticing the beginning of it, the very first signal, that subtle shift in the body. The moment tension appears, the moment assumption starts forming, because in that small gap there is something new, and this is awareness. And awareness is the beginning of rewiring, not control, not suppression, only awareness. Now, something important happens when you stay in that awareness. The system expects you to follow the old pattern, but you don't fully follow it. You pause, even slightly, even for a second, and that pause is new data for your nervous system. And this is the key. The nervous system learns through new experience of safety, not through ideas, through lived moments, by repetition. So when you don't immediately react, when you don't immediately assume, when you don't immediately collapse into the old emotional pattern, you are literally changing. You are literally teaching your system something new. At first, it might feel uncomfortable because the old pattern is familiar and the familiarity feels like home to the brain, even if it's hurting, even if it's hurt, but slowly something changes. The intensity reduces. The automatic reaction becomes less dominant, and a new space appears between stimulus and response. And in that space, you are no longer just a reaction, you are a choice. And this is what rewiring the nervous system actually means. Not becoming something new overnight, but interrupting the old pattern enough time that it loses its automatic power. And over time, your system starts to learn something new. That not every trigger is a danger, not that every silence is a rejection, that not every uncertainty is a threat. And slowly, your internal world stops projecting the same emotional story outward, because when the nervous system changes, perception changes, and when the perception changes, reality is experienced differently. Not because the world changed, but because the observer did. And that is the most amazing part. Now, let's make this real, because this is where most people finally recognize themselves. We're not just talking about ideas anymore, we are talking about lived experience. Different emotional states don't just stay inside you, they shape how you interpret everything outside you, and slowly your outer world starts to reflect your inner emotional baseline, not in a mystical way, but through attention, behavior, reaction, and interpretation. Let's go through real life patterns. The first one is abandonment fear. A person carries a deep fear of being left. They don't always notice it consciously, but in relationships, they overthink silence, they interpret the lie as rejection, they become anxious when space appears. And what about outside? What happens outside? They often experience partners who feel emotionally distant, but here is the loop. Their fear makes them cling. Clinging creates pressure. Pressure creates distance, and distance confirms the original fear. Second, insecurity. Someone feels insecure inside, so their system scans for signs of rejection. A simple tone change becomes, "They're upset with me." A short message becomes, "They don't care anymore." And externally, relationship become tense and unstable. Not because others changed, but because neutral behavior is constantly interpreted through insecurity. Third, unworthiness. A person believes deep down, "I'm not enough." So they tolerate less attention, less respect, less effort, and outside reality reflects that tolerance. People unconsciously meet the level of expectation being held. Fourth, anger. Unprocessed anger inside creates sensitivity outside. Small things feel disrespectful. Neutral situations feels offensive. And relationships becomes reactive. Conflict appears everywhere, but the emotional filter is already conflict-based. Fifth, anxiety. An anxious nervous system sees uncertainty everywhere. Even stable situations feel unstable, so decisions become inconsistent and life feels chaotic. Not because life is chaotic, but because stability is not being registered internally. Sixth, control issues. A person who needs control tries to manage outcomes, but life naturally resists control. So situations feel like they're not working out. But the deeper layer is the nervous system cannot relax into uncertainty. Seventh, emotional neglect. Someone who learned emotional neglect early tends to feel unseen, even in social environments. They might be surrounded by people, but still feel invisible. And they may attract relationships where they feel emotionally not fully met. 8. Overgiving. One-sided relationship. A person who fears losing connection gives too much, over-explains, over-sports, over-adapts, and slowly attracts imbalance, because the internal message is, I must earn connection through effort. 9th, trust issues. When trust is low internally, even good intentions feel suspicious, so intimacy cannot fully develop, and relationships feel close but not fully safe to you. 10th, low self-worth. When worth is not felt internally, external approval becomes necessary. So life becomes dependent on reactions, attention, and feedback. And emotionally stability depends on outside response. Now, listen carefully. None of this means you are causing everything in your life. That would be a misunderstanding. What it means is something more precise. Your internal emotional state influences what you notice. What you notice influences how you react, and how you react influences what you experience, and over time this creates repeating patterns. And when people say, why does always happen to me? What they are actually sensing is, I keep recognizing the same emotional structure in different forms. But here is the turning point. Once you see the pattern, that structure, you are no longer fully inside it. You are observing it, and that changes everything, because awareness interrupts automatic reactions, automatic patterns. So after everything we talked about today, after patterns, after childhood conditioning, after the nervous system, a deeper question remains. What if life was never trying to punish you? What if life was never against you? What if nothing was randomly happening at all? What if every experience, every relationship, every emotional trigger was simply revealing something you were finally ready to see? Because here is the uncomfortable truth. Life does not mirror who you wish you are. It mirrors, it reflects who you believe yourself to be. Beneath words, beneath motivation, beneath effort, you don't meet life at the level of your goals. You meet life at the level of your internal identity, and that identity speaks quietly through expectations, through reactions, through emotional habits you didn't even know that you carried. Think about a mirror. You would never stand in front of a mirror and try to clean the reflection. Let's say that there is a dirt and you would clean the dirt, and the reality, you wouldn't try to clean the mirror itself, right? You wouldn't argue with it, you wouldn't try to change, you wouldn't blame it, you wouldn't beg it to change. You would just understand immediately, and being aware the image changes only when you change. And yet this is exactly what most people do with life. They try to fix the reflection, change the people, change the environment, change the circumstances. It would never work, while the inner image remains untouched. Well, life keeps reflecting, not to trap you, but to wake you up. Every trigger is information. Every repetition is an invitation. Every emotional reaction is a doorway back to yourself. Nothing in your life has been blocking you but yourself. Life has been patiently showing you where you stop seeing yourself clearly. The moment you stop fighting the reflection, fighting that mirror, you regain power, not control over the world outside of you, but the authorship over your experience. And something extraordinary happens then. People feel different around you, opportunities feel different, even silence feels different to you, because reality begins responding to a nervous system that is no longer repeating the past. You don't chase different outcomes anymore. You don't chase at all, because there is nothing to chase. There is nothing to chase and change. You become a different observer, and the reflection changes naturally, effortlessly, and quietly. So I want you to try something simple. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what inside me is being shown right now? But not with a judgment, with curiosity, with to get to know yourself, to observe yourself. Because the moment you see the pattern, you are already stepping outside of it. And that is the first powerful step. And once you step outside of it, you are free to create differently. Your life was never broken. You were just looking at the mirror without realizing you were the source of the image all along. And if this episode resonated with you, don't rush away, sit with it, notice what comes up, because awareness is where Transformation quietly begins. Take a deep breath, look at your life again, and remember, nothing is only happening to you. Life is moving through you. Thank you. Please write your thoughts, questions, or experiences in the comment. I would be very, very happy about it. Thank you so much for listening.